Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this is Taking Care of Business. And joining me today is Romana King, who is Director of Content at Zolo. She's also an expert in personal finance and real estate. Thanks, Romana, for joining us today.
It's great to be here.
All right, you've got a new book coming out, House Poor No More. First of all, let me ask you what that book's all about.
Well, I'm going to be bold and I'm going to make a statement. It's the Canadian Handbook for Smart Home Ownership. I think that just pretty much sums it all up. But that's exactly what it is. It's for anyone who wants to own a home or is thinking of buying a home and how to actually be a smart homeowner, both with your home and with your personal net worth.
Okay, tell me why you decided to do this.
I'm going to date myself. Is 2 decades ago when I started doing personal finance coverage, I was told that real estate and buying a home really wasn't a personal financial decision. And I think 2+ decades ago, it probably wasn't a personal financial decision. It was more of an emotional decision. I don't think anything has changed. I think it's more an emotional decision when we buy our first home or second home. But I think in the last 2 decades, it has become absorbed in that personal finance discussion because now affordability is an issue. It's the biggest debt you're going to acquire. It's the largest asset you're probably going to acquire. So it's almost de facto part of your personal net worth, de facto part of that personal finance larger decision.
Let's just before getting into some of the stuff about the book, let's just stop there for a second and talk a little bit about the personal finance aspect of it. And as you mentioned to me, this is Financial Literacy Month in Canada, right? When we look at home ownership, we get people, as young as early 20s starting to look at purchase a home, right? And yet they probably know like zero about home ownership and zero about the whole process, right? Is this something we should start at an earlier age teaching kids and about? Because you know what, it's going to be the biggest financial decision they ever make in their lives for the vast majority of people. So is it something that we should prepare people for at a much earlier age?
Short answer, yes. But I don't think we need to concentrate on, is it home ownership we're teaching them? Or it's more about financial literacy. It really does boil down to financial literacy, which, it's not going to come as a shock. We don't teach that. There's no national program. There's no national educational program to help people learn financial literacy skills. And there's a few basics that I think really apply to home ownership. Basic numeracy, which is, can I calculate what's a good value? When it comes to what cost per square foot, or, a home costs this much in this city, this much in this city, but I earn this much. These are all basic numeracy skills. Compound interest. Do I understand what it's going to cost me over the long haul to take on this debt? Mortgage rates are low now. What happens when they rise? What happens to the cost of that borrowing? What happens to my investments if I put off saving retirement so I can buy a home? I lose out on that compound interest. So there's a lot of financial literacy built into home ownership and built into the decision to buy a home. And I think when we teach those skills at an earlier age, we can take those foundational skills and really help apply them when people are of interest. So when you're interested in something, you learn faster because you're far more engaged. When someone's interested in buying a home, it's a lot easier to get them to understand the crux of it, or the decisions that really need to be made, if they understand the basics and the foundational financial literacy skills.
Okay, let me ask a little bit about being a homeowner, and what's the connection between owning a home and, I guess, well-being for the general person?
So one of the reasons, the impetus why I wrote this book is I think there's a lot of shame about why we buy a home. We're told over and over and over again, it's so expensive, you'd be a fool to buy. And yet we can see by numbers, I'm one of those numbers, we're still buying homes. So then we do what I would say is sort of foolish things. We try and take evidence out there to justify our decision. And part of what I do in this book is I try and say, just stop doing that. Stop naming and blaming your decision as to why you want to buy a home. We buy homes for emotional reasons. I want security. I want to raise a family. I want a sense of community. And those are all very valid because that's part of our well-being. And
Yeah.
the reality is I can't build on my net worth. I can't, grow in my career. I can't grow a family if I don't establish, some of my basic needs. And one of those basic needs is the desire to feel safe and stable and secure in where I live. So buying a home for emotional reasons is a good enough reason. This book then says, okay, now that you're okay with that, now that you've done that, or you're about to do that, now let's make some smart decisions once you're a homeowner. Let's make those financial decisions once you've made that emotional decision.
Okay, super. What are some practical tips you can give people to create value in their homes?
A good takeaway that I would say is a lot of people will buy a home, at the top of their budget. That's why I talked about, house poor, no more. It's called being, house rich, cash poor. You don't want to be left with nothing in the bank account. You do have to weigh and balance all of those budgets. Retirement savings, cost of living. What if your pet gets sick, your child gets sick? All of that has to be factored in. Are buying a home and you're going to stick with a budget, the other thing I would talk about is become smarter or get educated about what makes a good smart renovation. There's lots of information out there. I framed it slightly different in this book. I talked about the value of solving problems. I think we don't buy a house just because it looks beautiful. There's lots of reasons why we do, but we also buy a home because it solves a problem. If it's a home with a fenced in yard, that solves a problem of having a safe place for my dog and my children to play, or having a nice private area where I can have a backyard oasis. If I have noise issues, I'll build a fence. So renovating to solve a problem will actually add more value to your home. I also talk a little bit about how we actually value property. A lot of people assume that because you buy a home and you do renovations, suddenly it's worth more. I kind of burst that bubble a little bit and remind people, all homes, even new homes, are depreciating every single year. The real value is in the land. So how do you actually maximize the value of that land by keeping your home in good nick, in good repair, and maybe doing some value add or problem solving renovations? I also really try and debunk the myth that your debt is a terrible thing and you have to immediately pay it off and do whatever I talk about the debt as a tool. Your mortgage is a tool. How do you use that tool effectively? How do you use the equity in your home effectively so you can grow your overall net worth?
Super. What about taxes and mortgage? How do you maximize savings in those areas?
I mean, this is what I think a lot of homeowners that sort of have all the basics. They understand now how to tackle their mortgage. How do you pay it off faster? How do you do prepayment privileges? I take my RSP rebate, I put it on my mortgage, I get that money back. They understand how to sort of use that cycle of debt and equity to their benefit. And I sort of extend that a little bit and I start talking about, the difference between, say, good debt and bad debt, or good bad debt or bad good debt. And, we go into all these nuances. But the reality is that your mortgage is not tax deductible, and any debt that's not tax deductible isn't as favorable. So I talk a little bit about how we can strategize to make non-deductible debt into tax deductible debt. And again, making your dollar, the dollar you work for you in better and more strategic ways.
Okay. The last thing I wanted to ask you regarding this is the maintenance costs, right? I think people really need to go into home ownership with a full understanding that the money you dish out doesn't just stop with your taxes and your mortgage, right? And having spent a couple of $1,000s or so on a new washer and dryer, just the other day, I know exactly what this means.
Oh, home ownership is expensive. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I put it out there. It's expensive. It's a debt. It costs money out of pocket every year. And maintenance is one of those things that you need to budget for. It's a lot easier if you live in a condo or a townhouse. It's kind of forced upon you. It's almost good that way. You have people telling you need to put this money aside in order to pay for these repairs. That's a good thing. It's almost like training wheels for like a single family detached. Because once you've got that single family detached, it's up to you. And if your roof leaks, you need to address that. And that could be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to $30,000 fix. And most people are shocked by that. I break it down. I talk a little bit about the must do maintenance on an annual basis, some of which is zero. It's just time. It's just disciplined, yearly checks. Some of it costs. And the reality is, I break it down. I kind of examine the, 1 to 5% rule that people throw out. That is on the high side. I'll explain that a little bit. You can save as much as $90,000 if you don't use that rule, but you'll have to read a little bit more to understand. But the reality is that you do need to put money aside. Maybe it's not as much, but you're looking at anywhere from 3,000 to 19,000, depending on how much you're going to pay professionals to do everything for you. That's not a small chunk of change. And in that sum, I also include the cost that you have. I had to replace appliances. I'm going to have to do that once every 10 or 25 years. I need to factor that into my costs, my overall housing costs.
Okay, super. Last thing, Romana, let's kind of go back to the financial literacy month that we're in. What is your kind of overall sense of the state of financial literacy in Canada today?
I think we can actually, I'm a silver lining kind of gal. I'm always going to look for a silver lining. I think it's really important to, pat ourselves on the back for what we've done good. And I think over the last year, particularly when we were in the midst of that pandemic and the lockdowns and the crises and the health concerns and financial concerns, I think our confidence actually grew, and it reflects in a survey that we did at Zolo. We did that last year, we did this year, and we're tracking how we feel as Canadians about our money, and our confidence grew. And I think that's great because confidence is a pillar of financial literacy. We need to feel confident in order to sort of stretch our wings, go out and learn more, practice more, get more knowledge and more skills and more application. So that's a good thing. Unfortunately, confidence isn't going to carry us through bad mistakes or mistakes that we make that we need to learn from. And so it still shows that we have a lot to learn. One of the concerns I have is that I think we use credit cards a little bit too liberally and we don't quite understand how they work well. We might get a mortgage and we don't quite understand how that interest is charged. And these are, basic things that we really need to understand. It goes back to that basic foundational,
Yeah.
basic numeracy. We need to understand those things in order to make better use of the money we earn. So if we're going to earn that dollar, let's put that dollar to best use when we have those skills.
Okay, super. Well, thanks, Romana, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mario. It was great to be here.
All right, super. That was Romana King, who is Director of Content at real estate firm Zolo. She's also an expert in personal finance and real estate. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, and this has been Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.